When I discovered the hidden phone in James's golf bag the day after our silver anniversary, 25 years of marriage collapsed like a house of cards. His messages with Eleanor, his executive assistant, revealed not just an affair, but an entire shadow life spanning our entire marriage. Within 24 hours, I had made a single phone call to his boss, the CEO of Morgan Stanley, that would ultimately dismantle the empire of lies James had constructed and redirect the course of both our futures. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The silver anniversary crystal still glittered on our mantle, catching the morning light as I packed James's golf clubs into the trunk of his Mercedes. 25 years, a quarter century of shared breakfasts, holiday cards, tax returns, and raising our son Ethan together. The night before, James had given a beautiful toast at the restaurant, his voice breaking as he called me the cornerstone of his success and the one constant in his chaotic world. Our friends had dabbed at their eyes. I had believed every word. That's what made the buzzing from his golf bag so innocuous at first. James had already left for the office. Early meeting, he'd said, kissing me goodbye. I assumed he'd forgotten his phone and would be calling soon on our landline, frantic to retrieve it, always so dependent on his devices. When I unzipped the side pocket, confusion set in immediately. This wasn't his iPhone with the monogrammed case I'd given him last Christmas. This was a sleek black Android I'd never seen before. The lock screen showed a preview of a text message. Missing you already. Last night was perfect. Can't wait until Paris next month. Love you always, E. E. Eleanor, his assistant of nearly 25 years. The woman who sent me Christmas cards, who coordinated gifts for our anniversary, who had attended Ethan's high school graduation. My hands trembled as I stared at the device, a foreign object that somehow represented an invisible fault line running through my marriage. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I don't regret it either. James used the same 4-digit code for everything: our house alarm, his ATM PIN, his regular phone. 1971, the year of his beloved Mustang. It worked on the first try. What I found wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was evidence of another life entirely. Photos of them together in places I recognized from our family albums. The Hawaii resort where James had claimed to be at a financial conference while I battled pneumonia at home. The Amalfi Coast villa he had visited for client meetings, summer Ethan broke his leg at soccer camp. There they were in Paris, Bali, Kyoto, Santorini. Eleanor in places I had dreamed of visiting, places James had always been too busy to take me. Their text history went back years, though the previous conversations had been deleted. But even the most recent exchanges revealed an intimacy that cut deeper than any physical betrayal could. Inside jokes, pet names, plans for the future. When will you tell her? Eleanor had asked just 2 weeks earlier. After Ethan's wedding? Next year? He deserves one last holiday season with his family intact, James had replied. I sat in our driveway for what felt like hours, scrolling through messages and photos, each one a dagger that pierced the carefully constructed narrative of our marriage. At some point, the neighbor's landscaper arrived, the rumble of his mower, providing a surreal soundtrack to the disintegration of my life. In the photos, Eleanor looked lovely, poised, elegant, 15 years younger than me. I had always thought she was attractive in that understated way of professional women who don't try too hard. Now I recognized the designer clothes, the discreet jewelry that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. Had James been supporting her financially? The thought made me physically ill. I considered my options. Confronting James seemed both obvious and somehow inadequate. Whatever explanation or excuse he offered would never address the magnitude of this deception. 25 years, our entire marriage, every anniversary, every Christmas, every vacation. My thoughts turned to Ethan, our 23-year-old son, now in his first year of medical school across the country. The pride of our lives. How would this affect him? The thought of destroying his image of our family made my chest constrict. Then I noticed something else in the photos. Behind Eleanor and James on a yacht, partially obscured but unmistakable, Wallace Morgan, James's boss and the CEO of Morgan Stanley, where James had worked for the past 2 decades. Another photo showed them all at what appeared to be a villa. Wallace, his wife Patricia, James, and Eleanor, arms around each other, like old friends. They knew. They had known all along. While I hosted dinner parties for James's colleagues, while I made conversation with Patricia at company Christmas parties, while I dutifully played the role of supportive investment banker's wife, they had all known. The humiliation burned hotter than the betrayal. I sat at our kitchen island, the phone clutched in my hand, and looked around at the house we had built together. The Viking range James had insisted on when we remodeled 5 years ago. The handcrafted dining table where we'd hosted countless dinner parties for his colleagues and clients. The family photos chronicling our life together. Ethan's graduations. Our vacations, holiday gatherings with extended family. Had any of it been real? Or had I been a convenient cover story, a respectable facade for his career advancement? My hand reached for my own phone before my mind had fully formed a plan. I knew Wallace's direct number, had called it once when James had a health scare in the office 3 years ago. My finger hovered over the contact entry. What exactly did I hope to accomplish? Revenge? Justice? Or just acknowledgement that I wasn't the only one who had been deceived? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The call connected after 2 rings. Catherine? Wallace's voice registered genuine surprise. What a pleasant, unexpected. I know about Eleanor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I know about the 25-year affair, the trips, the future plans. I know you and Patricia have been covering for them. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought we might have disconnected. Catherine, he finally said, his voice now carefully measured. I think this is a conversation you should have with James. I disagree, I replied. This stopped being just about my marriage when company resources were used to conduct and conceal the affair. When my husband's executive assistant, paid by Morgan Stanley, was actually his mistress. When company travel budgets funded their romantic getaways under the guise of business trips. Another pause. What exactly are you suggesting, Catherine? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that by this time tomorrow I will have spoken with Gloria Anderson at the New York Times. You know, the reporter who broke that story about executive misconduct at Goldman last year. I believe she'd be very interested in how Morgan Stanley executives use corporate resources to facilitate and hide extramarital affairs, especially in the current climate. Catherine, please, let's not be hasty. Hasty? After 25 years? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. I have the evidence, Wallace. The parallel phone, the text messages, the photos of all of you together, the receipts for gifts charged to the company card. Shall I go on? I heard him exhale, slowly. "What do you want, Catherine?" It was a good question. What did I want? Revenge seemed too simple, too temporary. I wanted more than to destroy James's career or publicly humiliate him. I wanted security. I wanted to ensure that after dedicating my life to supporting his career and raising our son, I wouldn't be discarded for a younger woman with a fraction of the investment I had made in our life together. I want a divorce settlement that reflects my contributions to James's career, I said finally. I want half of everything, including his stock options, his pension, his partnerships. I want the house. I want his support in telling Ethan on my terms. And I want Eleanor gone from the company. Today. Catherine, be reasonable. I am being entirely reasonable. Consider the alternative. A public scandal that would tank the company's stock, trigger an SEC investigation into misuse of corporate funds, and probably end several careers. Including yours, Wallace. The board tends to frown on executives who facilitate each other's indiscretions with company money. For the first time, I heard fear in his voice. I need to make some calls. You have until 5 p.m. After that, I call Gloria. I ended the call and placed the phone on the counter. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time since discovering the phone, I felt something other than shock and grief. I felt power. I poured myself a glass of the champagne, left over from our anniversary celebration, and walked through the house that had been the setting for our marriage. Scene of dinner parties and Christmas mornings, homework struggles and family movie nights. It was a beautiful home, one I had poured my heart into creating. James had provided the money, but I had created the warmth, the comfort, the sense of sanctuary. From my home office, I removed the large leather portfolio I kept in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Inside were copies of all our financial records, tax returns, investment statements, property deeds, insurance policies. James had always handled our finances, but I had quietly documented everything, a habit formed during my brief career as an accountant before Ethan was born. Before calling my attorney, a woman I knew through charity work who specialized in high-net-worth divorces, I took a moment to look at the family photos on my desk. Ethan as a toddler, his chubby hand in mine as we walked along the beach. James, and Ethan at a father-son camping trip, both sunburned and grinning. The three of us at Ethan's college graduation 2 years ago, proud parents flanking our accomplished son. James had been a good father. That much wasn't a lie. He had coached. Ethan's teams helped with science projects, taught him to drive. He had shown up for the important moments, just not for the daily ones, not for the midnight fevers, the teenage heartbreaks, the college application anxiety. Those had been mine to manage, just as the household had been mine to run while he built his career. I called my attorney, Marianne, and briefly outlined the situation. She listened without interruption, then said simply, "Don't do anything else. Don't confront him yet. Come to my office first thing tomorrow. Gather whatever financial documents you can without raising suspicion. And Catherine, I'm so sorry." After hanging up, I sat in silence, trying to process the seismic shift that had occurred in the space of a morning. By noon, my 25-year marriage had been revealed as a facade. By 5 p.m., according to Wallace Morgan's frightened tone, I would likely be on my way to securing my future. What would tomorrow bring? The grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from James's parents, chimed 12 times. Midday. Normally, I would be planning dinner, perhaps running errands, or meeting friends for lunch. The predictable rhythm of my life as Mrs. James. Hamilton, devoted wife and mother, community volunteer, occasional hostess for my husband's business associates. That life had ended the moment I found the phone. What would replace it? I was 52 years old. I had not worked outside our home since Ethan was born. My accounting credentials were hopelessly outdated. I had dedicated myself to creating a beautiful life for my family, to supporting James's career, to raising our son to be a good man. I had done all the things a wife of my generation and social circle was expected to do. And in return, I had been betrayed in the most fundamental way possible. Not just an affair, a brief lapse of judgment or midlife crisis, but a deliberate, sustained deception that spanned our entire marriage. The house phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. The caller ID showed James's office number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my cell phone vibrated with a text from him. Wallace called. We need to talk. Coming home now. So it had begun. I took a deep breath and steeled myself for the confrontation I had been avoiding. Perhaps it was better this way. No time to overthink, no opportunity for James to construct an elaborate defense or for me to lose my nerve. I poured another glass of champagne and waited in the living room, seated in the armchair I had reupholstered 2 years ago, a project I had undertaken while James was on another business trip with Eleanor. The front door opened precisely, 17 minutes later. Just enough time for him to drive from his downtown office to our suburban home, assuming normal traffic. James entered with none of his usual confidence. His face was ashen, his normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. He had loosened his tie, a nervous habit I recognized from the rare occasions when a deal went south or a client abandoned him. "Catherine," he said, his voice strained with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Not guilt, something closer to fear. I raised my glass slightly. Happy anniversary, again. His eyes darted to the second phone, which I had placed on the coffee table between us. I can explain. 25 years, James. Explain that. He sank into the sofa across from me, suddenly looking every day of his 54 years. It's complicated. Evidently. It wasn't what you think, he began, then faltered, perhaps realizing the absurdity of that statement in the face of the evidence. It started before we were even married. Eleanor and we had a history. A history that continued throughout. Our entire marriage, I said, my voice flat. He rubbed his face with both hands. Yes. Why marry me at all? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time. Because I loved you. I still love you, Catherine. I laughed then, a harsh sound that surprised even me. You have a peculiar definition of love. It's possible to love two people, he said quietly. Eleanor and we have a connection that's different. It doesn't diminish what I feel for you. Does she know that? Because according to your texts, you were planning to leave me after Ethan's wedding next year. He had the decency to flinch. That was, a moment of weakness, a fantasy. I wasn't actually going to... Stop lying, I interrupted. You're only making this worse. James fell silent, staring at his hands. He was still wearing his wedding ring, I noticed. A thick platinum band I had placed on his finger 25 years ago, promising to love and honor him. Had he made those same promises to Eleanor in some private ceremony of their own? Wallace says you're threatening to go to the press, he finally said, to expose the company, to ruin all of us. I'm ensuring my interests are protected. Catherine, please, my career, my reputation. Your reputation as what exactly? A faithful husband? A man of integrity? That reputation exists only in my imagination, apparently. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What do you want? Whatever it is, we can work something out. We can fix this. The familiar negotiator's tone. James the dealmaker, looking for a compromise, a way to minimize damage. I had heard him use this voice on the phone with difficult clients, with Ethan during his rebellious teenage years, with contractors who exceeded their estimates. What I want, I said slowly, is a divorce. I want half of everything. The assets you've accumulated while being married to me and sleeping with her. I want this house. I want you to explain to Ethan what you've done with me present. And I want you to do it without dragging my name through the mud or trying to justify your actions. And Eleanor? He asked, his voice barely audible. I don't care what happens to Eleanor. That's between you and her and Morgan Stanley's HR department. James nodded slowly, as if absorbing the terms of a business deal. Perhaps that's all it was to him, a transaction to minimize his losses. And if I agree to everything, you won't go public? This isn't blackmail, James, it's consequences. But yes, if you make this process as painless as possible, I have no interest in public humiliation. Unlike you, I'm thinking of Ethan. At the mention of our son, James seemed to crumple further. What will we tell him? The truth, or as much of it as he needs to know, that you've been unfaithful for years and we're divorcing. The details are up to you. James stood up suddenly, pacing the living room like a caged animal. 25 years, he muttered, almost to himself. You act like it was all a lie. It wasn't. We built a life together. We raised a son. We had good times. Yes, I acknowledged, we did, and you shared all of it with another woman. Every milestone, every celebration, every struggle. You brought her into our marriage without my knowledge or consent. You allowed me to believe in something that wasn't real. It was real, he insisted. My feelings for you were real. But not real enough to be faithful. Not real enough to be honest. He stopped pacing and faced me. What about counseling? A separation? Do we have to end everything immediately? I considered his question. Did some part of me still want to salvage this marriage? Could anything be rebuilt from the ashes of such a profound deception? What about Eleanor? I asked. Are you ending things with her? His hesitation was answer enough. Even now, facing the collapse of his marriage and potentially his career, he couldn't commit to giving her up. That's what I thought, I said quietly. There's nothing to save, James. It's already gone. He nodded, defeated. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. For what it's worth, I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. Every day for 25 years. James moved toward the door, then paused. Can I pack some things? Take what you need for tonight. We can figure out the rest later. He disappeared upstairs, returning 10 minutes later with a small overnight bag. At the door, he turned back. Catherine, don't, I cut him off. Just go. After he left, the house felt both emptier and somehow lighter, as if a weight I hadn't recognized had been lifted. I sat in the silent living room as afternoon faded into evening, processing the end of my marriage and the beginning of... What? My phone buzzed with a text from Wallace Morgan. Eleanor has been terminated. Legal will be in touch tomorrow regarding a settlement. James has agreed to your terms. No need to involve the press. One phone call. That's all it had taken to dismantle 25 years of deception. One moment of courage to reclaim my dignity and secure my future. The doorbell rang just after 7. Through the peephole, I saw Mary Ann, my attorney, holding a bottle of wine and what appeared to be Thai takeout. "I thought you might need company," she said when I opened the door. "And legal advice? Not necessarily in that order." I stepped back to let her in, feeling the first hint of something that might, eventually, become gratitude for this terrible awakening. 25 years of my life had been built on a lie. But the next 25? Those would be entirely mine to define. As Mary Ann unpacked cartons of pad thai and green curry on the kitchen island, I found myself thinking not of the past, but of the future. The pain was still raw, the betrayal still acute, but beneath it all was a curious sense of possibility. For the first time in decades, I was answerable only to myself. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. "So," Mary Ann said, handing me a glass of wine and settling onto a bar stool, "tell me everything, and then we'll strategize. You're going to be okay, Catherine. Better than okay." Looking into her confident eyes, I almost believed her, and for the first time since finding that phone, I allowed myself to cry. Not just for what I had lost, but for what I might yet become. The next morning dawned with a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I woke before my alarm, the California sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd selected 3 renovations ago. For a moment, the familiar comfort of Egyptian cotton sheets and the soft hum of the central air conditioning almost lulled me back into the illusion that life was unchanged. Then reality crashed back, the discovery, the confrontation, the collapse of my marriage. James hadn't returned after leaving yesterday. No calls, no texts beyond a terse message that he was staying at the Four Seasons downtown. His absence should have felt devastating. Instead, it created space for me to breathe, to think, to plan without the distraction of his excuses or the weight of his presence. I dressed with unusual care. A charcoal Armani suit I'd purchased for Ethan's medical school white coat ceremony, pearl earrings that had been my mother's, sensible but expensive Ferragamo heels. Armor of sorts. The woman who stared back at me from the mirror looked composed, dignified, resolute. Only the slight redness around her eyes betrayed the devastation beneath the surface. Mary Ann's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming high-rise in Century City, all glass and steel and spectacular views. Her receptionist ushered me into a conference room where Mary Ann waited alongside a financial analyst and a forensic accountant, a team assembled overnight to dismantle the financial structure of my marriage. "Catherine." Mary Ann rose to greet me, her handshake firm. "I'd like you to meet Emily Chen, our top financial analyst, and Robert Devereaux, forensic accountant. Based on what you told me last night, I thought we might need to dig deep." I placed the leather portfolio containing our financial records on the conference table. "This is everything I have. Tax returns for the past 7 years, investment statements, property records. James handled most of the finances, but I kept copies." Emily opened the portfolio and began organizing documents while Robert typed rapidly on his laptop. Mary Ann guided me to a seat at the head of the table. Before we begin, she said, her voice gentle but firm, I want to set expectations. High-asset divorces are complicated under the best circumstances. When infidelity and corporate misconduct are involved, they become battlegrounds. But you have leverage, Catherine, significant leverage. The threat to go public, I said. Yes, but threats only work when you're prepared to follow through. Are you? I considered the question carefully. Was I willing to expose James's duplicity to the world? To potentially damage Morgan Stanley, an institution where thousands of innocent employees worked? To subject Ethan to the public humiliation of his father's infidelity splashed across the business pages? If necessary, I said finally, but I'd prefer to avoid it, for Ethan's sake. Marianne nodded approvingly. That's the right approach. We use the threat as leverage, but settlement is almost always preferable to scorched earth. For the next 2 hours, we methodically analyzed my financial situation. James's base salary at Morgan Stanley was substantial, but it represented only a fraction of his compensation. The real money was in bonuses, stock options, ownership stakes in private equity deals, and various investments, many of which I knew nothing about. He's been clever, Robert said, looking up from his examination of our tax returns. But not clever enough. There are discrepancies here that suggest hidden assets. Hidden from me or hidden from the IRS? I asked. Possibly both, Robert replied. But we'll need access to his private accounts to know for sure. Emily tapped her pen against her legal pad. The corporate angle is particularly interesting. If company resources were misused to facilitate the affair, travel expenses, salary for Eleanor when she was functioning as a romantic partner rather than an executive assistant, gifts charged. To the company card, that's not just a personal issue, it's corporate malfeasance. It gets worse, Marianne added. If Wallace Morgan and other executives were aware and complicit, it creates a pattern of behavior that could trigger shareholder lawsuits, regulatory investigations, even criminal charges in extreme cases. I felt suddenly overwhelmed. This was becoming larger than I had intended, not just the end of my marriage, but potentially the end of James's career, maybe even his freedom. Did I want that? I'm not trying to destroy him, I said quietly. I just want what's fair. Marianne reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Which is exactly why we have this leverage. James and Morgan Stanley will want to avoid the nuclear option as much as you do. That gives us room to negotiate. As if on cue, Marianne's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Lawrence Keller, Morgan Stanley's general counsel. Right on schedule. She raised an eyebrow at me. Shall I put him on speaker? I nodded, smoothing my skirt under the table, an unconscious gesture of preparation. Lawrence. Marianne's voice shifted into professional neutrality. I have you on speaker with my client, Catherine Hamilton. Ms. Kingston. The voice was smooth, cultured, practiced in the art of diffusing high-stakes confrontations. And Mrs. Hamilton, thank you for taking my call. I understand there's been a situation that requires our attention. Marianne met my eyes, silently encouraging me to respond. A situation, I echoed, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. Is that what you call a 25-year affair conducted by one of your senior executives with his executive assistant, facilitated, through company resources and known to your CEO? A brief pause. Mrs. Hamilton, I want to assure you that Morgan Stanley takes these allegations very seriously. We've already initiated an internal review. Ms. Eleanor Winter's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. That's a start, I acknowledged. We would like to resolve this matter discreetly and fairly, Lawrence continued. To that end, we're prepared to offer a generous settlement package, including continued health benefits and— Mr. Keller, Marianne interrupted smoothly. Let's be clear about something. This isn't an HR issue to be resolved with a severance package. This is a potential corporate governance catastrophe involving misuse of shareholder funds, breach of fiduciary duty, and systematic deception at the highest levels of your organization. Another pause, longer this time. What exactly are you seeking? Full financial disclosure, Marianne replied. Complete transparency regarding all of James Hamilton's compensation, including deferred bonuses, stock options, partnership interests, and any other forms of remuneration. A forensic accounting of all business expenses related to Eleanor Winters over the past decade, and a settlement that fully reflects Catherine Hamilton's contributions to her husband's career. That's extensive, Lawrence said carefully. It's the starting point, Marianne countered. The alternative is considerably more painful for all involved. A heavy sigh came through the speaker. I'll need to consult with our executive team. You have 24 hours, Marianne said. After that, my client reserves all rights to pursue other avenues of resolution. After the call ended, the room fell silent. I felt simultaneously empowered and exhausted, like I had just scaled a mountain only to realize the true summit was still ahead. You did well, Marianne said. Very well. Now we wait. I returned home to find 3 voicemails from James and a dozen increasingly desperate text messages. I ignored them all and instead called Ethan, my heart pounding as I dialed. How would I tell my son that his father had been living a double life throughout his entire childhood? Mom? His voice, slightly distorted by distance and poor reception, instantly brought tears to my eyes. Everything okay? You never called during the day. I'm fine, sweetheart, I lied, hating the deception but unwilling to deliver this news over the phone. Just missing you. How's school? We chatted about his classes, his roommate, the research position he was hoping to secure next semester. The normality of it was surreal, this conversation floating above the wreckage of my marriage like a helium balloon untethered from the ground. And Dad? Ethan asked. How was the anniversary? Did he finally take you to Catalina like he's been promising? The innocent question pierced through me. No, just dinner at Providence. I forced lightness into my voice. Listen, I was thinking of flying out to see you this weekend. Would that work with your schedule? This weekend? Surprise colored his tone. But you and Dad were just here last month for Parents' Weekend. I know, but I miss you, and I have some things I need to discuss with you. In person. A pause. Mom, what's going on? Is it Dad? Is he sick? No, nothing like that, I assured him quickly. It's complicated. I'd rather not get into it over the phone. Now you're scaring me, Ethan said, his voice dropping. Just tell me, are you and Dad okay? The direct question demanded an honest answer. I couldn't lie to my son, not about something so fundamental. No, sweetheart, we're not. But we'll figure it out, and whatever happens, we both love you very much. Silence stretched between us. Then, I'm booking a flight home. I'll be there. Tomorrow. Ethan, your studies? Can wait, he interrupted firmly. Family comes first. You taught me that. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of our bed, My bed now, I supposed, and allowed myself a brief moment of despair. James's betrayal was devastating enough. Now I had drawn Ethan into the aftermath. Yet another consequence of decisions I hadn't made, lies I hadn't told. My phone vibrated with an incoming call. James again. This time, I answered. "Catherine, thank God," he began, words tumbling out in a rush. "We need to talk, to figure this out. Morgan Stanley is in panic mode. Wallace is threatening to fire me if this goes public. Please, can we meet? Just the two of us?" "I'm meeting with my lawyer again tomorrow," I said flatly. "If you want to talk, bring your attorney." "This doesn't have to be adversarial," James pleaded. 25 years, Catherine, that has to count for something." "It does count," I replied. "It counts as 25 years of betrayal." A heavy sigh. "I deserve that. I know I do. But Catherine, please understand. I never stopped loving you. What I had with Eleanor was different. It wasn't better, just different." "How magnanimous of you," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "To love us both equally while lying to us both consistently." "I wasn't lying to Eleanor," he said, then immediately seemed to regret it. The admission stung more than I expected. So I was the only one being deceived. Good to know. "That's not what I meant," James backpedaled frantically. "It's complicated. Eleanor knew I was married, of course, but she understood the situation." "The situation," I repeated. "You mean our marriage?" "Yes. No. I don't know anymore." He sounded genuinely confused, which only fueled my anger. How dare he claim confusion when he had orchestrated this deception for decades? "Ethan is flying home tomorrow," I said, changing the subject abruptly. "He'll want answers. What do you plan to tell him?" Silence, then a soft curse. "You told him that we're having problems, yes. The details, no. That's on you." "Catherine, please, can we present a united front here, for Ethan's sake?" The audacity of his request nearly took my breath away. "A united front? Where was your concern for united fronts when you were building a second life with your assistant? Where was your concern for Ethan when you were planning to leave after his wedding?" "I wasn't really going to—" "Stop lying," I cut him off. "I read the messages, James. I saw the photos. I know everything." He fell silent. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its pleading tone, replaced by something colder, more calculating. "What exactly are you looking for here, Catherine? Money? The house? What's your price?" The shift was jarring but clarifying. This was the real James, the ruthless negotiator who saw relationships as transactions, who quantified emotional value in dollars and cents. "My price," I said slowly, "is honesty. Something you clearly know nothing about. Tell Ethan the truth. Give me a fair settlement that reflects my contributions to your career and our family, and stay the hell away from me." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time, from fury. How had I spent 25 years with a man who could reduce our entire relationship to a financial settlement? How had I missed the fundamental emptiness at his core? The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw an unfamiliar delivery person holding a massive bouquet of roses, at least 3 dozen in deep crimson. I opened the door cautiously. "Mrs. Hamilton?" The young man consulted his clipboard. "Delivery for you." I accepted the flowers with a murmured thanks and carried them to the kitchen counter. The card nestled among the blooms read simply, "Forever sorry, forever yours. J." A hollow laugh escaped me. Even his apology was a performance. Grand, public, designed to impress. I dropped the entire arrangement, card and all, into the trash, compactor, and pressed the button, watching with grim satisfaction as the machine pulverized James's gesture into fragments. My phone pinged with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Catherine, this is Eleanor Winters. We need to talk." I stared at the message, bile rising in my throat. The audacity was breathtaking. I blocked the number without responding and poured myself a glass of water, trying to steady my nerves. But curiosity nagged at me. What could Eleanor possibly want to say? An apology? An explanation? Or something else entirely? Had James put her up to it? Another manipulation in his increasingly desperate playbook? Before I could dwell on it further, my phone rang again. Marianne this time. "Catherine, I just got off the phone with Lawrence Keller again. Morgan Stanley is taking this very seriously. They're preparing a comprehensive disclosure of James's compensation and benefits, and they've put James on administrative leave pending an internal investigation." Administrative leave? That seems mild. "It's a first step," Marianne assured me. More importantly, they're clearly concerned about potential broader implications. Lawrence hinted, without explicitly saying so, that there may be other executives with similar arrangements. "A culture of infidelity," I said dryly. "A culture of entitlement," Marianne corrected, "which works in our favor. The larger the pattern, the more desperate they'll be to keep this quiet." After we hung up, I wandered through the house, touching familiar objects that suddenly seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. The Waterford crystal vase James had brought back from a business trip to Dublin. Had Eleanor been with him? The framed photo from our 20th anniversary celebration in Napa. Had he called her from our hotel room while I slept? Every memory was now shadowed by questions, every cherished moment potentially tainted. In my walk-in closet, James's clothes still hung neatly on his side. Designer suits, custom shirts, ties organized by color and pattern. I ran my fingers along the sleeves, remembering how I used to straighten his collar, adjust his tie before important meetings. Had Eleanor performed those same intimate gestures in hotel rooms across the world? I pulled out my suitcase and began packing methodically. Clothes, toiletries, essentials for a few days away. I needed space, distance from this house and its contaminated memories. A hotel, perhaps, or maybe the beach house in Malibu we kept as a rental property. Somewhere to breathe, to think, to begin imagining a future without James. As I zipped the suitcase closed, my phone rang again. Ethan. "Mom, got an earlier flight. Landing at LAX at 11 tonight. Can you pick me up or should I Uber?" "I'll pick you up," I said immediately. "Text me your flight details." "Already did." "Mom, is Dad going to be there too?" I hesitated. "I don't know, sweetheart. That's up to him." After we hung up, I texted James. "Ethan landing at LAX at 11 p.m. Thought you should know." His response came immediately. "I'll be there. Can we present a united front for his sake? Please." Again with the united front. As if our marriage had been anything but a carefully constructed facade. Still, for Ethan's sake, I could manage a temporary truce. "Fine," I replied, "but he deserves the truth, James. All of it." "I know. came the response. I'm staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Can we talk before meeting him? Privately? I considered refusing, but what would that accomplish? Eventually, we would need to have conversations about division of assets, about co-parenting. Though Ethan was an adult, he still needed both his parents. About the logistics of untangling 25 years of shared life. The hotel bar, 8 p.m., I texted. 1 hour, no more. The Beverly Hills Hotel had been the site of numerous celebrations throughout our marriage. Anniversary dinners, birthday cocktails, even the occasional staycation when we couldn't manage a proper vacation. The pink stucco facade and palm-lined entrance now seemed like a movie set, unnaturally bright and strangely two-dimensional. James was waiting in a secluded corner of the bar, nursing what appeared to be scotch. He stood when he saw me, his face haggard despite the expensive haircut and bespoke suit. For the first time, I noticed gray at his temples that hadn't been there before. Or perhaps I simply hadn't been paying attention. Catherine, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Thank you for coming. I sat without removing my coat, a small signifier that this meeting was temporary, conditional. You wanted to talk. So talk. James took a deep breath, then another sip of his drink. First, I want to say how sorry I am. Not just for the affair, but for the deception. For making you doubt our entire marriage. An affair is a fling. James. A mistake. A momentary lapse. What you had with Eleanor was a parallel life. A 25-year commitment. He nodded slowly. You're right. I won't minimize it. But Catherine, you have to believe me when I say my feelings for you were never false. Our life together, raising Ethan, building our home, all the holidays and celebrations and quiet moments, that was real. For me, I said, it was real. For me. For you it was. What? A convenient cover story? A respectable front for your career advancement? Half of a double life? It wasn't like that, he protested. I compartmentalized. When I was with you, I was fully present, fully committed. Except when you were texting her from family vacations, or calling her from business trips we took together, or planning your future with her while celebrating. Anniversaries with me. He flinched. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. But I can't undo the past 25 years. All I can do is try to make amends going forward. And how exactly do you propose to do that? James leaned forward, his expression earnest. First, complete financial transparency. I've authorized Morgan Stanley to provide full disclosure of all my compensation and benefits. No hidden assets, no surprises. Second, a generous settlement. The house, the beach property, half of all our investments and retirement accounts. More than half if you want. And Ethan? I asked. How do you plan to make amends to him? A flicker of genuine pain crossed his face. I don't know, he admitted. I only know that I need to try, that I can't lose him too. You should have thought of that before building your life on lies, I said, but the words lacked the bite I intended. Despite everything, some small part of me still responded to his pain, still remembered the young man who had held my hand through childbirth, who had taught Ethan to ride a bike, who had sat with me through my father's funeral. I know, James said quietly. Believe me, I know. We sat in silence for a moment, the ambient noise of the bar, soft music, muted conversations, the gentle clink of glassware, creating a cocoon of privacy around our broken marriage. What happens now? James finally asked. With us? There is no us, I said, the words cutting even as I spoke them. Not anymore. There's you and me, Ethan's parents, who will find a way to coexist civilly. There's you and me, soon-to-be ex-spouses, who will divide assets and move on with separate lives. But there is no us. He nodded, resigned. And my relationship? With Eleanor? The question ignited a fresh burst of anger. That's not my concern. Though I have to wonder what kind of future you could possibly build with someone who willingly participated in a 25-year deception. If she was comfortable being your mistress for decades, what else might she be comfortable with? It wasn't like that, James started, then stopped himself. No, you're right. It was exactly like that. We told ourselves a story about star-crossed lovers and impossible circumstances, but the truth is simpler. We chose deception because it was easier than making hard choices. It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said since I discovered the phone, and despite myself, I felt a flicker of respect for the admission. Ethan will be landing in 3 hours, I said, glancing at my watch. I suggest we both go to the Faye airport separately. Give him space to process this in his own way. James nodded. I'll tell him the truth, all of it. He deserves that much. As I stood to leave, James caught my hand. Catherine, I know you may never forgive me, but I want you to know. You were never a convenience. Never a cover story. You are, an extraordinary woman who deserved far better than what I gave you. I withdrew my hand gently. Yes, I said. I was. I did. And now I'm going to find it. The bright fluorescent lights of LAX's arrival terminal cast harsh shadows across Ethan's face as he emerged through the sliding doors. Though it was nearly midnight, the airport bustled with activity, families reuniting, business travelers dragging wheeled luggage toward waiting Ubers, airline staff in crisp uniforms navigating the controlled chaos. I spotted my son immediately, his tall frame and familiar gait a beacon amid the crowd. He saw me at the same moment, his expression shifting from weariness to concern as he took in my appearance. Had I changed so much in the 2 days since discovering James's betrayal? Or was Ethan simply attuned to the nuances of his mother's face after 23 years of shared life? Mom, he said simply, wrapping me in a hug that transported me instantly to his childhood, to skinned knees and bedtime, stories to high school graduations and college drop-offs. I breathed in the scent of him, unchanged despite the adult he'd become. Where's Dad? He asked, looking around as we separated. Waiting at baggage claim, I replied. He thought it might be less crowded. In truth, James and I had deliberately arrived in separate cars, a physical manifestation of the fracture in our family. We'd exchanged terse texts coordinating our arrival times, like diplomatic envoys navigating hostile territory. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the strain beneath my carefully neutral tone. Mom, what's going on? You're scaring me. Let's get your bag first, I said, avoiding the question. Your father is waiting. We walked in silence toward the baggage claim area, Ethan's worried glances burning against my profile. James stood near Carousel 4, hands tucked into the pockets of his cashmere overcoat, looking simultaneously powerful and diminished, the executive facade intact, but somehow hollow now that I could see behind it. Dad! Ethan called, quickening his pace. James turned, his face lighting with genuine joy at the sight of our son. Whatever else he might be, Liar, cheat, betrayer. His love for Ethan had always seemed authentic. I wondered, not for the first time, how he had compartmentalized so effectively, being a devoted father while simultaneously living a double life. They embraced, James clapping Ethan on the back with perhaps more force than necessary. "Good to see you, son, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Ethan stepped back, looking from James to me and back again. "Would someone please tell me what's happening? Mom said you were having problems, but neither of you will say what kind of problems." A middle-aged couple brushed past us, arguing quietly about whether they had left their car in Section B or C of the parking structure. A toddler nearby began wailing, overtired and overstimulated by the late hour and airport commotion. These ordinary moments of human life continued around us while our family teetered on the brink of irreversible change. "Not here," James said quietly. "Let's get your bag and go somewhere we can talk privately." After retrieving Ethan's battered duffel bag, the same one he'd carried to summer camp as a teenager, we made our way to the parking garage in uncomfortable silence. The unspoken question loomed: whose car would Ethan ride in? The choice suddenly seemed fraught with significance, a premature taking of sides before he even knew what the sides were. "I'll meet you both at the house," James said, answering the question before it could be asked. He squeezed Ethan's shoulder. "Give you a chance to catch up with your mom on the drive." As we pulled out of the parking structure in my Audi, Ethan turned to me, his profile illuminated by passing streetlights. "Mom, please. I left med school and flew across the country because you sounded like someone died on the phone. What's going on between you and Dad?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter, focusing on the road ahead. How much should I tell him? How much was mine to tell versus James's? The entire situation felt like navigating a minefield in the dark. "Your father has been having an affair," I said finally, the words sounding almost mundane compared to the devastation they represented. "A long-term affair with Eleanor." "Eleanor?" Ethan's voice rose in disbelief. "His assistant, Eleanor? The one who always remembers my birthday and sent me that care package during finals last year?" "Yes." "But that's—" "How long?" he asked, struggling to process. I hesitated. This was the cruelest part, the revelation that would shatter not just Ethan's image of his father, but potentially his understanding of his own childhood. 25 years, apparently, since before we were married. Silence filled the car, broken only by the rhythmic sweep of windshield wipers against a light drizzle that had begun to fall. Los Angeles, crying with us. "That's my whole life," Ethan said finally, his voice small. "That can't be right." "I wish it weren't," I replied softly. "But it's true. I found evidence. Irrefutable evidence." "Does this mean you're getting divorced?" The question was direct, almost clinical, the future doctor in him seeking clarity amid emotional chaos. "Yes," I said, realizing as I spoke that I had fully made this decision somewhere between discovering the phone and this moment. I can't stay married to someone who built our entire relationship on deception. Ethan nodded slowly, processing. "I need to hear Dad's side, too. Not that I don't believe you," he added quickly. "I just need to understand how this happened." "Of course," I said, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "That's why we're meeting him at the house. You deserve the full truth from both of us." James's Tesla was already in the driveway when we arrived. The house, our house, my house now, glowed with welcoming light, as if nothing had changed, as if it were simply awaiting the return of a beloved son rather than the scene of an impending family implosion. We found James in the kitchen, having made coffee despite the late hour. The domesticity of the gesture struck me as both touching and absurd, preparing caffeine for a conversation that would keep us all awake regardless. "Ethan," James said, pushing a mug toward our son. "Mom told you about Eleanor?" Ethan accepted the coffee but didn't drink. "She said you've been having an affair with her for my entire life." His tone was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. James sighed heavily, leaning against the kitchen island. "It's complicated, but yes. Eleanor and I have been involved for many years. Before I met your mother, actually." "Then why marry Mom at all?" Ethan asked, the question I had posed to James myself. "Because I loved her," James said, meeting my eyes briefly. "I still do, but Eleanor and we had a history. When your mother and I started dating, Eleanor had moved to London for work. I thought it was over between us. Then she came back, and I couldn't choose." "So you chose both," Ethan said flatly, without giving Mom the option to choose whether she wanted to be part of that arrangement. The clarity of his assessment, cutting through James's justifications to the heart of the betrayal, filled me with a strange pride amid the heartbreak. My son, seeing the truth with unclouded eyes. "I was selfish," James admitted. "I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone, that I was being a good husband and father while still having something that was just for me. I rationalized it 1,000 different ways." "And Eleanor was okay with this arrangement?" Ethan asked, his expression hardening. "With being your secret for 25 years? James shifted uncomfortably. "She understood the situation. We had our own life together when I traveled for business, vacations sometimes. She knew I wouldn't leave your mother while you were growing up." "But you were planning to leave after my wedding next year," I interjected, unable to help myself. "I saw the messages, James." Ethan's head snapped toward his father, eyes widening. "You were going to wait until after my wedding to divorce Mom? So what? I'd have nice family photos to remember before you blew up our family." "It wasn't like that," James protested weakly. I didn't want to disrupt your big day." "How considerate," Ethan snapped, a rare flash of anger breaking through his usual calm demeanor. "Lying to Mom for another year so my wedding wouldn't be awkward." James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen countless times throughout our marriage, during difficult negotiations, challenging parent-teacher conferences, heated political discussions. "I've handled this all wrong. Every bit of it. I know that now." "How did you find out?" Ethan asked, turning to me. "After all these years?" I explained about the buzzing phone in the golf bag, the text messages, the photos that revealed a parallel life spanning decades. As I spoke, Ethan's expression shifted from anger to a deep sadness that seemed to age him beyond his years. "All those business trips," he said quietly. "The conferences and client meetings. Were any of them real?" "Most were," James said quickly. "The work was always real. Eleanor really is, my executive assistant. But yes, sometimes we extended trips or arranged to be in the same cities." "And Morgan Stanley knew about this?" Ethan asked, his mind connecting dots just as mine had. "They were okay with you using company resources to facilitate an affair?" James grimaced. "Some people knew. Wallace Morgan, certainly. Probably others in senior management. It's not uncommon in the finance world, though that doesn't make it right. Is that why you called his boss? Ethan asked, turning to me with sudden understanding. The title of that YouTube video you sent me to explain why you needed to talk, I discovered my husband's 25-year affair the day after our anniversary, so I made one call to his boss. I nodded, feeling a flush of embarrassment at having sent that clickbait title as a hasty explanation when Ethan first texted about coming home. I needed leverage to ensure a fair settlement. And to ensure Eleanor was fired, James added, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. She should have been fired years ago, I retorted, for gross misuse of her position, if nothing else. Ethan held up his hands, physically inserting himself between our brewing argument. Okay, I think I understand what happened. What I don't understand is why you're telling me all this now. Why not wait until after the divorce was finalized? Why drag me into the middle? The question hung in the air between us, neither James nor I having a satisfactory answer. We had both claimed to be protecting Ethan, yet here he was, home from medical school, sitting in our kitchen at 1 a.m, being forced to witness the disintegration of his parents' marriage in real time. Because you deserve the truth, I said finally. Because I couldn't bear the thought of lying to you, even by omission. And because your mother threatened to go public with the affair if I didn't agree to her terms, James added, including telling you everything. I shot him a withering look. Don't make this about my terms, James. This is about the consequences of your choices. Ethan looked between us, his expression unreadable. Then he stood abruptly. I need some air and time to process this. Sweetheart, I began reaching for him. Not now, Mom, he said, not unkindly but firmly. I just need space. We watched in silence as he walked out the back door toward the pool area, his shoulders hunched against the light rain that continued to fall. Through the kitchen window, I could see him pacing the length of the pool deck, hands thrust deep in his pockets, face tilted toward the sky. He's angry, James said softly. He's hurt, I corrected, and confused. His entire understanding of our family has just been upended. James nodded, his eyes following our son's restless movement outside. I never wanted him to know. Not like this. You never wanted him to know at all, I pointed out. You were perfectly content to maintain the lie indefinitely. Until after the wedding, he admitted. Yes. We fell into uncomfortable silence, two people who had shared a bed, raised a child, built a life together, now suddenly strangers with nothing left to say. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, marking each second of this new fractured reality. I should go, James said eventually. It's late, and I doubt Ethan wants to see more of me tonight. Where are you staying? I asked, the question oddly personal given the circumstances. The Beverly Hills Hotel still, until I can find an apartment. He hesitated. Catherine, regardless of how things end between us, I want you to know that what we built together, our family, our home, it meant everything to me. Still means everything. If it meant everything, I said quietly, you wouldn't have risked it for Eleanor. He had no response to that. With a final glance toward Ethan's silhouette by the pool, James gathered his coat and keys and left. The front door closed with a soft click that somehow felt more final than any slam could have. I remained at the kitchen island, staring at the 3 coffee mugs, mine untouched, James's half empty, Ethan's cooling and forgotten. Such a small detail, yet it seemed to embody everything about our broken family. 3 separate vessels, no longer sharing the same substance. After about 20 minutes, Ethan came back inside, rain-dampened and subdued. "Dad left?" he asked, noting the empty space where James had stood. "Yes. He's staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel if you want to talk to him tomorrow." Ethan nodded, absently, then fixed me with a direct gaze that reminded me so much of the determined little boy who had insisted on tying his own shoes, no matter how many attempts it took. "Mom, are you okay? Really okay?" The question caught me off guard. Throughout this ordeal, I had been so focused on the practical aspects, securing a fair settlement, managing the confrontation with James, protecting Ethan, that I had barely considered my own emotional state. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I'm angry, I'm heartbroken, I feel foolish for not seeing the signs, but I'm also relieved in a strange way. Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't know existed, and now it's gone." "Because you finally know the truth?" "Yes. And because I can finally start building a life that's authentically mine, not one built on someone else's lies." Ethan absorbed this, then asked, "What happens now, practically speaking?" "Divorce proceedings, division of assets. I'll keep the house, at least for now. Your father's firm is arranging a settlement. They're eager to avoid publicity." "And me? Where do I fit in all this?" I reached for his hand across the island. "Exactly where you've always been, at the center of both our hearts. This changes nothing about how we feel about you, Ethan. You're still our son, our greatest achievement, the only true thing in our marriage." He nodded, squeezing my hand briefly before pulling away. "I should try to sleep. It's been a long..." "Chuck, of course. Your room is ready for you. I changed the sheets this morning." As Ethan headed upstairs, I found myself alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the artifacts of my married life. The copper pots hanging above the island, the family calendar on the refrigerator, the framed photos on the windowsill. 25. Years of memories, some genuine, some now tainted by knowledge of James's duplicity. I thought of Eleanor, suddenly jobless after 25 years of building her career at Morgan Stanley. Did I feel sympathy for her? Not exactly. She had made her choices, just as James had. But I did wonder what story she had told herself throughout those years. Had she believed James would eventually leave me? Had she convinced herself that their relationship was somehow more real, more meaningful than his marriage? Or had she simply accepted her position as the other woman, content with whatever scraps of time and attention James could spare from his real life with me and Ethan? My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I knew immediately who it was. "Catherine, please, we should talk. This affects my life too." Eleanor. I blocked the number without responding, just as I had done earlier. Whatever Eleanor Winters wanted to say to me, I had no interest in hearing it. She had been complicit in my humiliation for 25 years. She deserved no audience now. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching divorce attorneys specializing in high net worth cases involving corporate misconduct. Marianne was excellent, but I wanted a second opinion, particularly regarding the potential legal implications for Morgan Stanley. If Wallace Morgan and others had facilitated James's deception using company resources, shareholders might have grounds for action beyond my personal claims. I made notes, created folders, organized information, practical tasks that kept my mind occupied and my emotions at bay. This methodical approach had served me well throughout my life. When Ethan was born with jaundice, I had researched treatments and created a feeding schedule. When my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I had investigated clinical trials and coordinated his care team. When James traveled for business, leaving me alone with a young child and a household to manage, I had developed systems and routines that kept everything running smoothly. Systems and routines. The infrastructure of a life dedicated to supporting others, my son, my husband, my parents. What systems would I create for myself now? What routines would emerge from the wreckage of my marriage? The question was both terrifying and exhilarating. Around 3 a.m, exhaustion finally overtook me. I closed my laptop and made my way upstairs, pausing briefly outside Ethan's door. A thin strip of light showed beneath it. He was still awake, probably still processing the seismic shift in his understanding of our family. Should I knock, offer comfort, or give him the space he clearly wanted? Before I could decide, my phone buzzed again. James. Is Ethan okay? Are you? Such a simple question. Yet it carried the weight of 25 years of shared parenthood. Whatever James had done to me, whatever deceptions he had perpetrated in our marriage, his concern for Ethan was genuine. That, at least, I could acknowledge. He's processing. We both are. I'll have him call you tomorrow, I replied. Thank you, came the immediate response. Then, a moment later, I'm sorry, Catherine, for everything. I didn't respond to that. Some wounds were too deep for apologies. Some betrayals too fundamental for forgiveness, at least for now. Perhaps someday I would find it in myself to forgive James, not for his sake, but for my own. But that day was not today. Instead, I continued to my bedroom, our bedroom once, now mine alone. The king-sized bed looked absurdly large for just one person. I considered sleeping in the guest room but dismissed the idea immediately. This was my house, my bed, my life. I would not be displaced from any of it. I changed into pajamas, performed my nightly skincare routine, and slid between the cool sheets. The emptiness beside me was both strange and somehow right. A physical manifestation of the truth that had existed for 25 years without my knowledge. James had never fully been there, not really. His heart and mind had always been divided. His presence incomplete. Now at least, the empty space was honest. As I drifted toward sleep, my thoughts turned not to the past but to the future. I was 52, not 25. I had resources, intelligence, capabilities I hadn't fully explored while focusing on supporting James's career and raising Ethan. What would I do with this unexpected freedom? What did Catherine Hamilton, not Mrs. James Hamilton, not Ethan's mother, but Catherine herself, want from the next chapter of her life? I fell asleep pondering these questions, and for the first time since discovering James's phone, my dreams were not of betrayal, but of possibility. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through curtains I had forgotten to close. For a moment, the events of the past few days seemed like a distant nightmare. Surely James would be downstairs making coffee, the familiar rhythm of our married life continuing unchanged. Then reality reasserted itself, bringing with it a curious mixture of grief and anticipation. The end of something precious, yes, but also the beginning of something new. I heard movement downstairs. Ethan, already awake despite our late night. I found him in the kitchen, making breakfast with the comfortable familiarity of someone returning to their childhood home. The sight warmed me. Whatever happened between James and me, whatever reconfiguration our family underwent, Ethan would always belong here. "Morning, Mom," he said, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs across the island toward me. "Coffee's ready." "Thank you, sweetheart." I accepted both gratefully, studying his face for signs of distress. He looked tired but calm, the initial shock having settled into something more contemplative. "I called Dad," he said, joining me at the island with his own plate. "Asked him to meet me for lunch. I have questions only he can answer." I nodded, respecting his need to understand his father's perspective. "That's fair." "I also called my academic advisor," Ethan continued. "Explained we're having a family crisis. He's arranging for me to do this week's labs remotely and make up the lectures when I get back. I want to stay through the weekend, if that's okay." "Of course it is," I said, touched by his desire to remain with me during this difficult transition. "But Ethan, don't put your education on hold for too long. Med school waits for no one, not even family drama." He smiled slightly at that, a glimpse of his usual dry humor. "Noted. Though I think discovering your father's secret double life qualifies for at least a long weekend away from cadaver dissection." We ate in companionable silence for a while, the normality of sharing breakfast providing comfort amid the chaos. Eventually, Ethan set down his fork and looked at me directly. "Mom, last night you said something that stuck with me about building a life that's authentically yours." "Yes? What does that look like for you? After the divorce, I mean." The question echoed my own late-night thoughts. "I'm not entirely sure yet," I admitted. "For so long, my identity has been wrapped up in being your mother and James's wife, supporting both of you in your endeavors. Now I have the opportunity and the necessity to rediscover who I am apart from those roles." "You were an accountant before I was born, right?" "Yes, though that was a lifetime ago. My skills are hopelessly outdated now." "So, update them," Ethan said simply. "Go back to school if you want. Or do something completely different. You're only 52, Mom. You could have an entire second career if you wanted." The straightforward encouragement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "When did you get so wise?" He shrugged, a little embarrassed. "I just know you've always been more than Dad's wife or my mom. You organized Dad's entire client database when his secretary quit suddenly that time. You managed Grandpa's care team like a professional healthcare coordinator. You've been running charity galas and fundraisers for years. Those are real skills, Mom." His assessment washed over me like a revelation. Ethan was right. Throughout my marriage, I had developed capabilities that went far beyond the traditional role of corporate wife and mother. I had been James's unofficial business consultant, Ethan's educational advocate, my father's medical coordinator, our community's volunteer organizer. What might I accomplish if I directed that energy toward my own pursuits rather than supporting others? "Thank you," I said softly, "for seeing me clearly, for reminding me to see myself clearly." Ethan reached across the island to squeeze my hand. "Just returning the favor. You've always seen the best in me, even when I couldn't see it myself." As I watched my son rinse our breakfast plates and load them into the dishwasher, I felt a surge of something powerful and unfamiliar. Not the protective maternal love I was accustomed to, but a new appreciation for the adult he had become. Somewhere amid the chaos of discovering James's betrayal, my relationship with Ethan had subtly shifted from parent-child to something more balanced, more equal. It was, perhaps, the only positive outcome of this painful ordeal: the opportunity to know my son as an adult, to be known by him not just as a mother, but as a woman finding her way through unexpected territory. "I'm meeting with Marianne again this afternoon," I said, making a decision. "Would you like to come with me? Not for the legal details, but to help me start thinking about what comes next, what my authentic life might look like." Ethan smiled, real smile, not the careful, supportive expression he had maintained since arriving. "I'd like that, Mom. I'd like that a lot." As we moved through the kitchen together, clearing away the remnants of breakfast, I felt a curious lightness beginning to replace the heavy weight of betrayal. James's deception had shattered the foundation of my life. Yes. But from those fragments, I could build something new, something entirely of my own making. The thought was no longer terrifying. It was liberating. 6 months can change everything. The seasons had turned twice since I discovered James's phone in his golf bag. Winter, giving way to spring, spring blossoming into summer. The jacaranda trees lining our street, my street now, had erupted in their annual purple splendor, carpeting the sidewalks with delicate blooms that crunched beneath my morning walks. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago, the settlement more generous than even Marianne had anticipated. Morgan Stanley, desperate to avoid scandal, had ensured James provided compensation far beyond what California law required. The house and beach property transferred solely to my name, substantial alimony despite my lack of financial need, and a private apology from Wallace Morgan himself, delivered in person over lunch at the Peninsula Hotel. "Mrs. Hamilton," he had said, his voice carefully modulated to convey both corporate concern and personal regret. "On behalf of the firm, I want to express our sincere apologies for our role in this situation. The misuse of company resources to facilitate personal relationships is against everything we stand for." I had merely raised an eyebrow at him, sipping my sparkling water while he squirmed. We both knew it was a lie. That Morgan Stanley, like most financial institutions, had long operated with an unspoken code that protected its male executives' indiscretions. But the NAR Me Too movement and subsequent corporate reckonings had changed the landscape. Wallace couldn't risk a scandal that might trigger broader investigations into the firm's culture. "Your apology is noted," I had said finally. Though I wonder how many other wives might be owed similar conversations. His flush had told me everything I needed to know. Now, on a perfect June morning, I stood in what had once been James's home office, overseeing its transformation into my own workspace. The heavy mahogany desk and leather chair, symbols of traditional masculine power, had been replaced with a glass-topped table and ergonomic seating that better suited my frame. The dark paneling had been painted a soft sage green, the hunting prints exchanged for contemporary art I had selected myself. "The bookshelves should go there," I instructed the carpenter, pointing to the wall opposite the window. Floor to ceiling, with the rolling ladder attached to the rail. He nodded, making notes on his tablet. "Any particular wood or finish, Ms. Hamilton?" Ms. Hamilton, the return to my maiden name had been a deliberately symbolic choice, a reclamation of the self I had been before becoming Mrs. James Hamilton. The carpenter's casual use of it still sent a small thrill of independence through me. White oak with a natural finish, I decided, to match the flooring. As the carpenter took measurements, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Flight landed. See you soon. Bringing a friend. Hope that's okay?" A friend. This was new. Ethan had maintained a monk-like focus on his studies since returning to medical school, channeling his emotional turbulence about our family into his education. He had shared little about his personal life during our weekly calls, and I had respected his privacy, understanding that he needed space to process the seismic shifts in his understanding of our family. "Of course," I replied. "Plenty of room. Is this someone I should prepare a separate guest room for?" The three dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, "Yes, please. Her name is Sophia. She's in my program, just friends, but would be more comfortable with separate rooms." "Her? A female friend? Interesting. Looking forward to meeting her," I texted back. "Dinner at 7? Perfect, thanks. Mom." After the carpenter left with his measurements and deposit check, I wandered through the house, seeing it with fresh eyes, imagining how it might appear to Ethan's friend Sophia. The living room had been reupholstered in textiles I had selected myself, without deferring to James's preferences for the first time in 25 years. The kitchen had been subtly reorganized to better suit my cooking style rather than accommodating James's occasional culinary experiments. Every room reflected small but significant changes, not a complete renovation, but a gradual recalibration to reflect only my taste, my needs, my vision. The house was becoming mine in a way it had never been ours. In the guest bedroom, I changed the linens to the crisp white Egyptian cotton I preferred, arranging fresh flowers on the bedside table and setting out plush towels in the ensuite bathroom. Whatever Ethan's relationship with this Sophia might be, I wanted her to feel welcome. My son deserved connection and joy after the trauma of the past 6 months. As I plumped the pillows, my thoughts drifted to James. We had maintained minimal contact since the divorce was finalized, communicating primarily through attorneys and later via brief formal texts when necessary. I knew from Ethan that he had rented an apartment in Century City, close to Morgan Stanley's offices. I knew he remained on administrative leave while the firm conducted its internal investigation, though Wallace had assured me James wouldn't be fired, merely reassigned to a less visible role. And I knew, though neither James nor Ethan had explicitly told me, that Eleanor was still in his life. She had relocated to Boston after her termination from Morgan Stanley, and James had been making frequent trips east for consulting work, he claimed. The pretense continued, albeit with different parameters. Did I care? Less than I would have expected. The white-hot fury that had propelled me through those first weeks after discovering the affair had gradually cooled to something more like indifference. James's choices were his own burden now, not mine to carry or concern myself with. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. "Marianne." "Catherine," she said when I answered. "Good news. The foundation paperwork is finalized. You're officially the founder and executive director of the Hamilton Financial Literacy Project." A smile spread across my face. This was my future taking shape. "That's wonderful. When can we start accepting applications?" "The website goes live next week. We already have inquiries from 3 community colleges and 2 high schools about hosting workshops." The Hamilton Financial Literacy Project had emerged from an unexpected revelation during the divorce process. As my financial team had untangled James's and my assets, I had discovered a natural aptitude for understanding complex financial structures, an ability to translate the opaque language of investment instruments and tax strategies into clear, actionable information. What had begun as a necessity for my own situation had evolved into a passion for helping others navigate their financial lives. particularly women emerging from divorce or widowhood who found themselves suddenly responsible for money management after years of delegating those responsibilities to spouses. "I've been thinking," I said to Marianne, who had become both legal counsel for the foundation and a close friend, "about expanding the mission, not just workshops but one-on-one coaching. So many women have reached out after hearing my story. They're overwhelmed, intimidated by financial jargon, afraid of making mistakes." "Like a mentorship program?" Marianne asked. "That could work. We'd need to consider liability issues, of course, but it aligns with the mission." "Exactly. Not providing specific investment advice, but rather teaching them how to evaluate advice they receive from professionals, how to ask the right questions, how to detect when someone is talking down to them or withholding information. All the things you wish someone had taught you 25 years ago," Marianne observed. Softly, yes. I touched the delicate silver pendant at my throat. A gift to myself on the day the divorce was finalized, a tangible symbol of lessons painfully learned. If I can spare even a few women from that kind of vulnerability, it will have been worth. After we hung up, I checked the time. Still 4 hours until Ethan and Sophia would arrive. Plenty of time to prepare dinner and change into something more presentable than the yoga pants and Columbia Business School t-shirt I was currently wearing. The Columbia shirt was new, part of the welcome package I had received upon enrolling in their executive MBA program, a decision that had shocked me as much as anyone else. At 52, I was older than most of my classmates, many of whom were in their late 30s or early 40s. But the pandemic-driven shift to hybrid learning models had made it possible to pursue the degree while remaining primarily in Los Angeles. James had been stunned when Ethan casually mentioned my graduate school plans during one of their weekly calls. "Your mother is getting an MBA?" he had asked, the disbelief evident even in Ethan's retelling. "At her age?" "Mom's only 52, Ethan had responded, the edge in his voice revealing his continued anger toward his father. "She could have an entire second career if she wants one. Besides, it's not about age. It's about finally doing something for herself instead of everyone else." The exchange had warmed me, not just for Ethan's defense, but for the essential truth he had articulated. I was doing this for myself, not to advance a career or please a spouse or fulfill anyone's expectations but my own. The freedom was intoxicating. As I marinated chicken for dinner, my thoughts turned to Eleanor. I hadn't spoken to her since that day at Morgan Stanley's offices, but her shadow still occasionally fell across my new life. Just last month, I had run into Patricia Morgan at a charity gala, Wallace's wife, who had known about James and Eleanor's affair for years while smiling to my face at company events. She had approached cautiously, clearly uncertain of her reception. "Catherine," she had said, extending her hand, "you look wonderful. How have you been?" The question, so innocent on its surface, so loaded with subtext, had momentarily stunned me. How had I been? Since discovering my husband's decades-long affair that Patricia had known about all along. Since restructuring my entire identity at the age of 52? Since learning that my marital security had been an elaborate illusion maintained at my expense? "I've been discovering what it means to live authentically," I had replied finally, my voice level. "It's quite liberating. You should try it sometime." She had flinched visibly, her hand dropping to her side. "Catherine, Save it, Patricia," I had interrupted, not unkindly, but firmly. "We both know you were complicit. The only difference between us is that I know the truth now. You're still living the lie. Walking away from her stunned expression had given me a satisfaction I wasn't entirely proud of, but honesty was my new policy. With others, and more importantly, with myself. At precisely 6:30, the sound of a car in the driveway pulled me from my preparations. Ethan was early, as usual. I smoothed my hair, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, and moved toward the front door with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Meeting my adult son's female friend shouldn't feel so momentous, but it represented a step into our new dynamic. One where Ethan had a life increasingly separate from mine, where he might someday build his own family with its own secrets and complexities. The door opened before I reached it, Ethan using his key out of long habit. "Mom?" he called. "We're here." "In the hallway," I responded, rounding the corner to find Ethan setting down luggage in the entryway. Beside him stood a slender young woman with curly dark hair and serious eyes behind stylish glasses. "Mom, this is Sophia Chen," Ethan said, his voice carrying a warmth I hadn't heard in months. "Sophia, my mother, Catherine Hamilton." Sophia stepped forward, hand extended. "It's so nice to meet you, Ms. Hamilton. Ethan talks about you constantly." "All good things, I hope," I said, taking her hand. "And please, call me Catherine." "Only the best," Sophia assured me. "He says you're the reason he went into medicine. Something about how you organized his grandfather's care team so effectively that it made him realize good health care requires more than just medical knowledge." I glanced at Ethan, surprised. He had never shared this origin story for his medical ambitions with me. "I didn't know that." Ethan shrugged, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "It's true. Watching you advocate for Grandpa, coordinate his specialists, research treatment options, it showed me what healthcare should look like when it's working properly. I wanted to be part of that." The revelation touched me deeply. All those years of believing I was simply performing expected family duties, never realizing I was inadvertently shaping my son's professional aspirations. "Well," I said, emotion making my voice slightly husky, "you're already a much better advocate than I ever was. Now, are you two hungry? Dinner's almost ready." Over herb roasted chicken and fresh vegetables from the farmer's market, Sophia revealed herself to be thoughtful, articulate, and clearly brilliant. A neuroanatomy researcher taking a detour through medical school before returning to the laboratory. She and Ethan had bonded over their shared interest in brain plasticity and recovery from trauma, a subject that suddenly seemed fraught with personal significance. "Ethan mentioned you're starting a nonprofit," Sophia said as I served a simple dessert of fresh berries and whipped cream. "The Financial Literacy Project?" "Yes," I confirmed, pleased by her interest. "We're launching officially next month. Teaching financial basics to women who find themselves suddenly responsible for managing money after divorce or widowhood." "That's incredible," Sophia said, leaning forward. "My mother could have used something like that after my parents divorced. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 15 years, then suddenly had to navigate investments and taxes and retirement planning on her own. It was overwhelming for her." "That's exactly the gap we're trying to fill," I explained, warming to my favorite topic. "Women often abdicate financial responsibility during marriage, trusting their spouses to handle investments and long-term planning. When that relationship ends through divorce or death, they're left vulnerable." "Mom's enrolled in Columbia's executive MBA program," Ethan added proudly, "while launching the nonprofit and renovating the house, and probably 3 other major projects she hasn't told me about yet. I laughed, recognizing the gentle teasing for the affection it represented. Not 3, just 2. I'm also taking a photography course at UCLA Extension. I always wanted to learn properly but never found the time. Or rather, Ethan clarified for Sophia, never allowed yourself to take the time for something that was purely for your enjoyment, rather than for someone else's benefit. His insight was uncomfortably accurate. Throughout my marriage, I had characterized my own interests as hobbies or someday projects, always secondary to the immediate needs of family and household. James's career advancement, Ethan's educational development, our social obligations, all had taken precedence over my own aspirations, until those aspirations had atrophied into vague someday dreams. Your son knows me too well, I acknowledged. But he's right. I'm learning, rather late in life, to prioritize my own growth alongside my responsibilities to others. I don't think it's ever too late for that, Sophia said quietly. My grandmother went to law school at 62, after my grandfather died. Everyone thought she was crazy, but she practiced elder law for 15 years and said they were the most fulfilling years of her life. The conversation flowed easily after that, touching on their medical studies, my MBA coursework, the Foundation's developing programs. At some point, I realized we had been talking for over 3 hours, the dishes long since cleared, our coffee, cups empty. More significantly, I realized I was genuinely enjoying myself, not performing the role of gracious hostess or supportive mother, but simply engaging as Catherine, a woman with opinions and experiences worth sharing. When Ethan finally yawned, unable to suppress his fatigue after the cross-country flight, I showed Sophia to the guest room while he took his childhood bedroom, a space I had deliberately left largely unchanged, a sanctuary for him amid the transformations elsewhere in the house. Thank you for dinner, Sophia said as I showed her where to find extra towels and the Wi-Fi password, and for welcoming me so warmly. Ethan was nervous about this visit, about how you'd feel about him, bringing someone home so soon after. Everything. Her delicate phrasing made me smile. Everything. Indeed. The collapse of his parents' marriage, the revelation of his father's double life, the restructuring of family dynamics he had always taken for granted. Ethan's happiness is important to me, I said simply. And you clearly make him happy, whether as a friend or whatever your relationship may evolve into. Sophia blushed slightly. We're taking it slowly. We both have complicated family histories that make us cautious about relationships. But yes, he does make me happy. He's one of the most honorable people I've ever known. The assessment warmed me. Whatever mistakes James and I had made, we had somehow raised a son with a strong moral compass, one who recognized the value of honesty and integrity in relationships. I can take credit for some of that, I said, but not all. Ethan's goodness is innate. He came into this world with a kind heart. After bidding Sophia goodnight, I returned downstairs to lock up and turn off lights. The house settled around me, creaking softly as houses do at night. I moved through the familiar rooms, seeing them anew through Sophia's eyes, the subtle changes I had made, the gradual reclaiming of space that had once been shared. On the mantle, a framed photograph caught my attention. Ethan at his white coat ceremony, flanked by James and me, all 3 of us smiling. I had kept it there deliberately, refusing to erase the good memories along with the painful ones. James had been a flawed husband but a devoted father. That complexity was part of our family story, not to be simplified or denied. My phone buzzed with a text. James. Ethan arrived safely? Yes, I replied. With a friend. Sophia Chen. She seems lovely. 3 dots appeared as he typed, disappeared, then reappeared. A female friend? I smiled slightly at his transparent curiosity. Yes, a neuroanatomy researcher in his program. Very impressive young woman. Another pause. Then, good for him. Catherine. I've been thinking about our last conversation, about what you said regarding Eleanor. Our last conversation had been a terse exchange when James collected the last of his belongings from the house 2 months ago. Eleanor had been waiting in his car. I had glimpsed her through the window but hadn't acknowledged her presence. As James had carried the final box to his trunk, I had remarked casually, I hope she's worth it. The cost, I mean. What about it? I texted now, curious despite myself. You were right, came his response after a long pause. The cost was too high. Not just for you, which was unforgivable, but for all of us. Even Eleanor. We're not together anymore. The revelation stirred surprisingly little emotion in me. Neither satisfaction nor sympathy, just a mild curiosity. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, the social nicety coming automatically. Are you? He asked. Not particularly, I admitted, opting for honesty. Your relationship with Eleanor stopped being my concern the moment I found that phone. I hope you find peace, James. That's all. And you? He asked. Have you found peace? The question gave me pause. Had I? These past 6 months had been a whirlwind of practical concerns, legal proceedings, financial reorganization, educational enrollment, launching the foundation. But beneath the activity, what was my emotional state? I've found purpose, I replied finally. Peace is still a work in progress. Fair enough, he texted. Good night, Catherine. I set down my phone without responding, the exchange having stirred contemplations I had been too busy to fully explore. Peace. What did that even look like after 25 years of unwitting deception? Forgiveness seemed both necessary for my own healing and somehow inadequate to address the magnitude of the betrayal. Yet holding on to anger served no purpose except to keep me tethered to a past I was working so diligently to transcend. There had to be some middle path, a way to acknowledge the injury without allowing it to define my future. I moved to the kitchen window, gazing out at the garden now bathed in moonlight. The jasmine I had planted after the divorce was thriving, its sweet scent drifting through the partially open window. In the far corner, a small Meyer lemon tree bore its first fruit, tiny green orbs that would eventually ripen into sweet tart citrus. New growth, patience rewarded, life continuing, its cycle regardless of human drama. My reflection in the window glass caught me by surprise, not because I looked markedly different than I had 6 months ago, but because I recognized the woman staring back at me in a way I hadn't for years. This was Catherine Hamilton, not Mrs. James Hamilton performing a role she had been cast in, but a woman fully present in her own life, making choices based on her own desires rather than others' expectations. The realization brought with it a profound sense of gratitude. James's betrayal had been devastating. Yes. The collapse of my marriage had upended my sense of security, my plans for the future, my understanding of my own past. But from that destruction had emerged an opportunity I might never have claimed otherwise, the chance to rediscover myself, to build a life aligned with my authentic values and aspirations. Would I have chosen this path? Never. The pain had been too acute, the disillusionment too profound. But standing in my kitchen, in my house, with my son and his friend sleeping upstairs, my foundation launching next month, my degree, program underway, I couldn't deny that this new life held a richness and potential the old one had never offered. Morning would come soon enough, bringing with it a day of showing Ethan and Sophia around Los Angeles, sharing meals, making memories untainted by deception. Then would come the next day, and the next, each one a blank canvas awaiting my choices, my priorities, my authentic self. I turned from the window, switched off the kitchen light, and made my way upstairs. The master bedroom, my bedroom now, welcomed me with its subtle redesign. The king bed had been replaced with a queen that better suited my solitary sleep habits. The walls, once beige because James preferred neutral tones, now glowed a soft terracotta that warmed my skin tone and lifted my spirits. On the bedside table lay a stack of books, not hidden in a drawer as they once had been to accommodate James' preference for a minimalist aesthetic, but prominently displayed as befitted their importance in my nightly routine. An MBA textbook, a novel by Toni Morrison, a biography of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a guide to advanced photography techniques. I slipped between the sheets, enjoying the cool whisper of high thread count cotton against my skin. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, its own opportunities for growth and connection. For tonight, this quiet moment of self-recognition was enough, a milestone on the journey toward that elusive peace James had asked about. Not quite there yet, but heading in the right direction, one authentic choice at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.